The recycled air of the Thunderhawk tasted of copper and ozone as Brother Chaplain Mordecus descended toward Umbral Sanctum, but the wrongness began before they breached the exosphere. Through the Vox channels came his own voice, speaking the litany of approach in his exact baritone cadence, arriving precisely 3.7 seconds before his lips formed the sacred words. Causality had inverted within sacred space, and every prayer now echoed backward through time, like a temporal wound bleeding into the present. Blessed Emperor, guide our bolters to find the heretic's heart, his voice proclaimed from the combead, and then Mordecus spoke the words himself, compelled by ritual and horrified by precedence. Brother Sergeant Castor's tactical updates followed the same impossible pattern, each transmission arriving as a ghost of future utterance before the living man gave voice to duty. Mordecus gripped his Crozius Arcanum tighter, the blessed weapon's ceramite handle warm against his gauntleted palm. In 17 Xenos purges across the ghoul stars, he had witnessed abominations that would shatter lesser minds. Tyrannid bioforms wearing human faces, chaos cultists speaking in pre-human tongues, orc mech boys building war machines from saints' bones. None had prepared him for this violation of the Emperor's divine order, this heresy that made effect precede cause within the sacred bandwidth of imperial prayer. Umbral Sanctum sprawled beneath them, 17 cathedral cities arranged across the shrine world's surface, like Gothic tumours reaching toward the Emperor's light. For 41 hours, each city had maintained perfect liturgical broadcast schedules, choral cycles, prayer bells, sacred hymns transmitted with mechanical precision across the Vox networks. Yet not a single human voice answered hails from orbit. The populations had vanished into silence while their prayers continued to echo through eternity. Telemetry, Vox displacement plus 3.7 seconds, stable across all frequencies, reported the Thunderhawk's pilot through Binharic-laced Gothic. Atmospheric nominal. Pressure and humidity within expected variance. The Auspex slate in Castor's gauntlets painted thermal signatures of the massive cathedral structures, while the populated zones registered as cold voids where human warmth should have blazed like votive flames. Frost formed on Mordecus's visor despite the temperate readings, and the taste of copper intensified with each kilometre of descent. Through the armoured viewport, he watched shadows cast by Gothic spires behave with unnatural independence, reaching toward their craft like grasping fingers that defied the angle of Umbral Sanctum's binary suns. Light itself seemed reluctant to touch the cathedral walls, bending around shadow edges as if darkness possessed physical weight that could deflect photons. Crusade Command confirms orbital cleansing authorization in 5 hours, 57 minutes, came the pilot's voice, mechanical devotion masking human dread. If the pre-echo heresy spreads beyond atmospheric containment, we glass the entire system. The weight of that pronouncement settled into Mordecus's enhanced bones. Whatever force could make human voices speak backward through time represented a threat to the very foundation of imperial faith. Prayer was humanity's direct connection to the Golden Throne. If that sacred link could be corrupted or inverted, no soul in the galaxy remained safe from damnation. The primary cathedral of Sanctum Majoris dominated the landscape ahead, its twin bell towers rising nearly 2 kilometres into the thin atmosphere. Gothic buttresses supported walls thick enough to house entire guard companies, while stained glass windows depicted the Emperor's triumph over Old Night in colours that should have thrown sacred fire across the plaza stones. Instead, the light pooled strangely, creating pockets of intensified darkness where illumination gathered like liquid shadow. Retro thrusters fired in sequence, slowing their descent toward the cathedral's landing platform. The polished granite surface lay empty beneath the pale suns. No welcoming clergy, No servo skulls carrying incense, no pageantry befitting visiting Astartes. Only silence, so profound it seemed to possess physical weight, absorbing sound like ash consuming spittle. The assault ramp descended with a hiss of blessed hydraulics. An umbral sanctum's atmosphere flooded the passenger compartment. The air carried expected scents of sanctified oils and burning incense, but underneath lurked something that made Mordecus's enhanced olfactory sensors register trace elements of temporal distortion, as if the very atmosphere remembered prayers not yet spoken. By his will, we walk upon sacred ground, Mordecus intoned the traditional planetfall blessing, hearing his own words arrive first through the vox channels like a mockery of faith. His ceramite boots touched the blessed granite without sound. The plaza, consuming noise as completely as a reliquary vault, swallows heretical whispers. Brother Castor's auspex chirped softly, the only sound that seemed to behave normally in this place where effect preceded cause. No life signs detected across the entire cathedral complex, Brother Chaplain. Machine spirits report no malice, but thermal readings remain anomalous. Mordecus stepped fully onto the landing platform, his enhanced vision cataloguing tactical positions and defensive angles with automatic precision. The cathedral doors stood half open in eternal welcome, their bronze surfaces reflecting light that moved independently of its sources. Above them, a mosaic of the Emperor Triumphant gazed down with eyes that seemed to track their movement across the empty plaza. It was then that he looked down and saw the shadows arranging themselves with deliberate purpose. The darkness cast by the cathedral's twin towers, by their own Thunderhawk, by every architectural element designed to glorify the Emperor's name, began to shift and coalesce across the blessed granite. Lines drew themselves in perfect high Gothic script, each letter formed with calligraphic precision that would have impressed the finest scribe servitors of the administratum. The message stretched across 30 meters of platform surface, written in shadows that possessed depth beyond mere absence of light, darkness that moved with patient inevitability toward the black Templar's boots. Mordecus felt his twin hearts skip their enhanced rhythm as he read words that had been waiting for their arrival since before they had decided to come. The quiet congregation awaits your voice. The bronze cathedral doors yielded to Mordecus's ceramite gauntlets without resistance, swinging inward on blessed hinges that should have groaned with centuries of sacred weight yet made no sound at all. The nave of Sanctum Majoris stretched before them like a throat designed to swallow prayers whole. Every Gothic arch, every ribbed vault, every acoustic chamber crafted by master architects to amplify whispered devotion now functioned in perfect inversion, consuming sound with hungry silence that felt almost predatory in its completeness. Brother Sergeant Castor advanced in tactical formation, his bolter sweeping left while Brother Thaddeus covered the right transept. Their ceramite boots struck blessed marble with impacts that should have thundered through the cathedral's resonance chambers, yet produced no sound beyond the impossible pre-echoes that arrived from ahead. Ghostly footfalls of future selves, walking routes they had not yet chosen, guiding their path through inverted causality. Auspex readings show negative acoustic values across all frequencies, Castor reported through vox channels that delivered his words before his lips moved. Negative 17 decibels where we should register positive amplification. The machine spirit calculates this as physically impossible. His enhanced Auspex slate flickered with Binharic cant that tried to resolve into prayer, its machine spirit struggling to comprehend measurements that violated fundamental acoustic principles. Mordecus swept his helmet's lumen beam across the transept arch, watching the blessed light dim when it encountered shadows. The darkness here possessed weight, bending photons like gravitational fields while incense burned cold in bronze censers, its sacred smoke falling upward in defiance of natural law. Purity seals attached to their armor fluttered in winds that moved no other objects, the blessed parchment responding to atmospheric disturbances that registered on no imperial sensor. The floor beneath their boots revealed geometric patterns etched into marble stones with precision that hurt to perceive directly. Octagons nested within Templar crosses, their angles existing in dimensions beyond normal space, creating optical distortions that made his enhanced vision struggle to focus. Each pattern pulsed with subtle wrongness, as if the stone itself remembered shapes that should not exist within imperial architecture. Liturgical phase displacement, Mordecus whispered, his chaplain training providing terminology for heresy that transcended normal classification. Acoustic heresy, where prayer becomes predatory rather than devotional. The technical jargon felt inadequate to describe what his enhanced senses perceived. Reality itself had been wounded here. Bleeding temporal distortion through architectural veins designed to channel divine grace. Stained glass windows depicting the lives of saints cast coloured light across the nave, but the images showed only empty robes and vacant armour, as if the saints had stepped out of their own hagiographic representations. Yet the shadows these windows created revealed human silhouettes in poses of desperate supplication. Kneeling figures with clasped hands and bowed heads, performing eternal prayers while their glass counterparts remained hollow vestments. Brother Thaddeus paused before St. Drusus's martyrdom window, his enhanced vision tracking the shadow figure that moved in living devotion, while the glass showed only discarded ceremonial plate. "Records here, Brother Chaplain," Thaddeus reported, retrieving data slates from prayer benches, arranged in perfect liturgical order. The screens scrolled with immaculate administratum precision. Candle inventories, choir schedules, confessional rosters, each entry stamped with current chronometer readings. Cathedral operations continued in real time, according to logged entries. Morning prayers conducted at prescribed hours, evening vespers performed with mechanical precision, all documented by personnel whose names appeared in duty rosters, but whose bodies cast no shadows in security picked feeds. Mordecus examined a slate marked with Cardinal Voss's ecclesiastical seal. The final entry, time-stamped 41 hours previously, read in High Gothic. Acoustic resonance chambers functioning at 112% efficiency. The congregation reports unprecedented spiritual clarity. Emperor protects. The handwriting belonged to a man whose physical form had vanished, while his administrative duties continued with bureaucratic inevitability. The transept opened before them, like a cruciform wound in reality, its crossing point marked by an altar of black granite that absorbed light rather than reflect it. Here, at the intersection of nave and choir, they discovered the source of the pre-echoed voices. A massive shadow stretched across the altar's surface, cast by nothing visible yet possessing perfect human proportions. The silhouette knelt in eternal prayer, its head bowed in devotion to an emperor whose light no longer reached this corrupted space. Most terrifying of all, the shadow figure spoke in Mordecus's own voice, reciting words that would emerge from his lips in moments yet to come. "Blessed Emperor, we seek understanding of this temporal heresy," it intoned with his exact baritone cadence, followed immediately by Castor's tactical assessment and Thaddeus's whispered prayer for the cardinal's soul. The shadow cardinal turned its head toward them with movements that suggested awareness beyond mere temporal echo. And when it spoke again, the voice belonged unmistakably to the missing ecclesiastical authority. Speaking their pre-echoed words in Cardinal Voss's distinctive tones, while its form remained perfectly, impossibly absent. Mordecus approached the shadow cardinal with tactical precision, his enhanced senses registering readings that violated every principle of imperial physics. The silhouette possessed measurable mass. His auspex detected gravitational distortion consistent with human form. Yet when he extended his Crozius Arcanum toward the kneeling figure, blessed ceramite passed through darkness without resistance. The shadow radiated body heat at precisely 28 degrees, warmth without substance, weight without matter, existence without presence. Blessed is the mind too small for doubt, the shadow cardinal intoned in Mordecus's exact baritone, speaking the opening words of the litany of purity before the chaplain's lips could form the sacred syllables. The temporal displacement had evolved beyond simple pre-echo. Causality itself had inverted within the cathedral's blessed confines, making effect precede cause with mechanical precision that suggested intelligent design rather than chaotic corruption. Establish overwatch positions, advance by tactical bounds, Brother Sergeant Castor commanded, his voice emerging first from the Shadow Cardinal's form before his vox channels carried the identical words. The squad moved with practiced efficiency, Brother Thaddeus securing the southern transept while Castor anchored the northern approach. Their tactical communications flowed through established protocols, yet each transmission echoed from the kneeling silhouette moments before living. Astartes spoke them into blessed vox equipment. The processional corridor beyond the altar stretched deeper into Sanctum Majoris's sacred architecture, its walls lined with evidence of interrupted ritual that defied natural law. Prayer wheels crafted from blessed bronze spun in reverse rotation, their inscribed litanies scrolling backward through devotional sequences, while candles burned from wick to base, consuming blessed wax in defiance of flame behavior. The sight abraded against Mordecus's training. Every element designed to amplify prayer now functioned in perfect inversion. Environmental distortions deepened with each advancing step. Humidity condensed upward from marble floors in pearl-fine droplets, creating inverted precipitation that fell toward vaulted ceilings, while frost patterns formed in radiating octagons across blessed stone. The air tasted of ozone struck from cogitator banks and old incense ground into stone, its molecular composition suggesting temporal displacement fields that aged atmospheric particles at accelerated rates while preserving others in temporal stasis. Votive offerings arranged before St. shrines formed impossible geometric spirals that hurt to perceive directly, their patterns suggesting mathematical relationships that existed beyond three-dimensional space. Each spiral nested octagons within Templar crosses, the angles assembling into liturgical phase lattices, whose orthogonal harmonics made Mordecus's enhanced vision struggle to maintain focus. Body horror manifested through discovered artifacts scattered along the processional route. Vestments lay perfectly preserved in alcoves and prayer niches, cardinal robes retaining the crease of kneeling, deacon stoles knotted for absent hands, choir surplices spread as if shoulders had simply stepped out of existence without disturbing a single thread. The fabric showed no signs of abandonment or struggle, each garment maintaining body warmth despite the absence of any human form to generate such heat. A servo skull released from Mordecus's pauldron mount bobbed forward, its machine spirit struggling to process readings that defied imperial understanding. Temporal displacement fields detected across all measurement spectra, it reported through Binharik Cant mixed with Gothic prayer. Causality inversion zones expanding at measured intervals. Phase advance of acoustic events increasing to 5.2 seconds in enclosed vaults. The skull's artificial intelligence attempted to categorize heresy that transcended normal classification systems. The Shadow Cardinal rose from its kneeling position with fluid grace, turning toward the processional corridor, while maintaining its impossible existence as darkness given human form. When it began to walk, its footsteps produced sound that arrived before its feet touched blessed marble, creating a rhythm of pre-echoed movement that guided their advance through the cathedral's corrupted architecture. Most disturbing of all, it began to recite a version of the Black Templar Crusade oath that had been subtly altered, words that Mordecus recognized as sacred yet wrong, in ways that made his enhanced physiology register spiritual contamination. No pity, no remorse, no fear, no silence, the Shadow Cardinal intoned in Cardinal Voss's distinctive voice, the final word replacing the traditional conclusion with terminology that suggested the temporal heresy's true nature. The processional corridor terminated at a sealed door marked with inquisitorial symbols that made enhanced vision struggle to focus. Adamantine slabs bore the rosette in triplicate, seals layered and relayered in wax colours denoting audits of audits, sanctifications of abeyance. The Shadow Cardinal stopped before the barrier, its form solidifying until it appeared almost substantial, despite remaining intangible to direct contact. When it spoke again, the voice belonged unmistakably to Mordecus himself, words that would emerge from his lips in moments yet to come. 7 knocks shall open the quiet gate, brother chaplain. But first, you must learn to listen to the silence between your words. The rosette seals crumbled beneath Mordecus's ceramite gauntlets as he delivered 7 precise impacts against the adamantine door, each knock arriving as pre-echo before his Crozius arcanum struck blessed metal. The temporal displacement had evolved beyond simple causality inversion. His actions now followed predetermined patterns that suggested the investigation itself served purposes beyond imperial justice. Ancient unlocking protocols cycled through their sequences, while the door exhaled stale air heavy with parchment dust and the metallic tang of temporal distortion. The chamber beyond functioned as both reliquary and data vault, its walls lined with illuminated manuscripts and cogitator banks that hummed with internal rhythms existing outside the cathedral's broader temporal field. Inquisitorial sigils glowed with faint phosphorescence across obsidian lecterns, confirming the chamber's provenance, while Brother Sergeant Castor's auspex registered localized field fluctuations distinct from the nave's acoustic heresy. Temporal displacement now consistent at plus 7.3 seconds within containment parameters. The servo skull reported through Binharik Kant that struggled to categorize readings that violated fundamental physics. Causality, inversion zones expanding geometrically across octagonal nodes. Warning. Acoustic essence reservoir approaching critical saturation. The machine spirit's artificial intelligence attempted to process data that transcended normal imperial classification while maintaining operational parameters through blessed redundancy. Documentation arranged across the central altar table revealed the partial truth that made Mordecus's enhanced physiology register spiritual contamination. Project Umbral Echo, a sanctioned Ordo Hereticus experiment designed to weaponize prayer itself by creating acoustic voids capable of silencing chaos incantations before demonic manifestation could occur. Umbral Sanctum had been selected as the primary test site for technology that inverted the fundamental relationship between sound and silence, prayer and void, devotion and emptiness. The Shadow Cardinal moved through the chamber with fluid purpose, its form now speaking in multiple voices that belonged unmistakably to the Black Templar squad, yet carried words they had not yet chosen to speak. Establish overlapping fields of fire, it intoned in Castor's clipped military cadence. Emperor protects the faithful, emerged in Thaddeus's measured devotional tone. By his will, we shall endure this heresy, arrived in Mordecus's own baritone, each utterance a precise temporal theft of words that would emerge from their lips in moments yet to come. Environmental horror intensified as the chamber's frescoes revealed their true nature. Painted Black Templars depicted in ceremonial formation moved independently of their static artwork, their shadows performing liturgical gestures not shown in the pigmented scenes themselves. One fresco showed a chaplain raising blessed incense, while his shadow wielded a Crozius that dripped temporal distortion. Another depicted warriors in prayer formation, while their shadows traced octagonal patterns in the air, creating geometric harmonics that hurt to perceive directly. Inquisitorial schematics spread across multiple data slates detailed the project's theoretical framework with clinical precision that violated every principle of imperial theology while maintaining absolute orthodoxy through sanctioned authority. Acoustic resonance chambers had been modified to trap devotional energy, storing prayer essence in temporal reservoirs that existed outside normal causality. Each cathedral city functioned as a collection node, gathering faithful utterances and compressing them into weaponizable silence capable of negating heretical incantations through preemptive acoustic cancellation. The recurring geometric motif appeared throughout the documentation. Octagonal containment fields designed to trap what the Inquisition termed acoustic essence, the spiritual energy generated by faithful prayer compressed into temporal storage matrices. Each octagon, nested within Templar crosses, formed causality anchors that stabilized temporal inversion without paradox collapse, creating pockets where effect could precede cause through controlled liturgical phase displacement. Religious dread crystallized into terrible understanding as Mordecus examined technical specifications that treated faith as quantifiable resource to be extracted and weaponized. Their prayers were being harvested before they spoke them, collected by temporal resonance fields and catalogued in acoustic reservoirs that turned devotion into ammunition. Every word of faith, every whispered litany, every battle cry that would emerge from their lips had already been captured and processed by technology that made prayer itself a predetermined echo of harvested essence. Brother Sergeant Castor established defensive positions with military precision that provided anchor points for sanity as cosmic horror threatened tactical doctrine. Ammunition status: blessed bolt rounds at 74% capacity, 2 frag grenades, 1 crack charge per battle brother. He reported through Vox channels that delivered his words after the Shadow Cardinal spoke them in his exact voice. Defensive perimeter established across chamber approaches. Fields of fire overlapping at central lectern position. The chamber's central cogitator displayed the project's expansion parameters. Plans to deploy acoustic void networks across 17 shrine worlds, creating a galaxy-spanning array of weaponized silence capable of neutralizing chaos manifestations before they achieved material presence. The theoretical framework described prayer as temporal energy that could be harvested from faithful populations, stored in causality-inverted reservoirs, and deployed as preemptive acoustic weapons that would silence heretical utterances by arriving before they were spoken. Most disturbing was the realization that their investigation followed routes established before their arrival. Mission parameters detailed in inquisitorial documentation matched their deployment orders with mechanical precision, suggesting their presence served the experiment's goals rather than imperial justice. They had become unwilling participants in a test that harvested their faith while they performed their duty. The Shadow Cardinal turned toward them, with movements that suggested awareness beyond mere temporal echo. Its form now accompanied by a second darkness that detached itself from Brother Sergeant Castor's physical body with fluid precision. The new shadow silhouette moved with tactical expertise, speaking in Castor's exact voice while describing ammunition expenditures and defensive positions that would occur in the coming hours, revealing a predetermined path through the cathedral's depths that left no room for choice or deviation in their investigation of this sanctioned heresy. The tactical crisis crystallized with mechanical inevitability as Brother Sergeant Castor's detached shadow gestured toward the spiral staircase, its movements describing routes through the cathedral's depths that had been predetermined before their arrival. Mordecus weighed duty against free will, while his own voice emerged from the Shadow Cardinal, speaking tactical assessments he had not yet chosen to make. The Emperor's will guided through flesh or temporal echo. The distinction had ceased to matter within Umbral Sanctum's corrupted architecture. We advance as predetermined, Mordecus decided, the words arriving from his lips moments after his shadow self had spoken them through the cardinal's form. Containment before catharsis. The orbital sanction draws near. Brother Sergeant Castor acknowledged with tactical precision that felt hollow when his detached silhouette had already performed identical gestures, signing battle cant that described their descent through crypts beneath Sanctum Majoris's blessed foundations. The spiral staircase descended through blessed stone worn smooth by centuries of pilgrimage, its walls lined with alcoves that should have contained the honoured dead of Umbral Sanctum's faithful population. Instead, each niche held perfect shadow impressions burned into granite, thousands of silhouettes arranged in poses of eternal devotion, their forms possessing depth and substance while remaining intangible to direct contact. Each shadow figure moved with living purpose, lips forming whispered prayers that arrived as pre-echo before the physical mouths that had once spoken them. Environmental rules inverted with each descending level. Brother Thaddeus's helmet lamps cast. No illumination when aimed at stone walls, their blessed lumens absorbed by darkness that possessed weight and substance. Yet the shadow impressions themselves radiated pale phosphorescence, creating inverse illumination that revealed architectural details through darkness rather than photons. The effect abraded against enhanced Astartes vision, forcing optical systems to process visual data that violated fundamental physics while maintaining tactical awareness through blessed redundancy. The descent filled their enhanced senses with contradictory input that suggested reality itself had been wounded. Cold incense mixed with ozone created atmospheric distortion that made breathing feel like consuming temporal displacement, while the sound of their own respirators arrived from ahead in pre-echoed rhythm that guided their movement through the crypts. Ceramite armor that should have weighed nearly half a ton felt lighter with each descending step, as if the shadow impressions absorbed gravitational force along with sound and light. Ammunition status, blessed bolt rounds at 71% capacity, Castor reported through Vox channels that delivered his words after his shadow self spoke them. Defensive perimeter maintained across stairwell approaches, fields of fire overlapping at each landing. Military precision provided anchor points for sanity as cosmic horror threatened tactical doctrine. Each procedural report a litany against the temporal heresy that harvested their faith before they could speak it. Body horror escalated through Brother Thaddeus's transmission that carried dread beneath military precision. Brother Chaplain, my shadow performs gestures different from my body movements, he reported, while his detached silhouette signed battle cant warnings in peripheral vision. His darkness raised fingers in tactical code while his hands remained on his bolter, signing warnings of slope inversion, phase shear ahead, absence pressure waves. The signs proved correct before he learned to believe them. When they paused upon command from darkness, fissures of nothingness whispered past like rivers they could not touch. The recurring geometric motif evolved beyond two-dimensional patterns etched into stone surfaces. Octagonal configurations now extended into three-dimensional space, creating architectural impossibilities that hurt to perceive directly. Nested octagons within Templar crosses formed spatial lattices that existed in dimensions beyond normal measurement, their angles assembling into causality anchors that stabilized temporal inversion without paradox collapse. Each pattern pulsed with subtle wrongness, as if the stone itself remembered shapes that should not exist within imperial architecture. Telemetry update, the servo skull intoned through Binharic cant. Gravitational distortion increasing with depth. Temporal displacement fields expanding beyond measurement parameters. Caution, approaching critical mass for causality inversion cascade. The machine spirit attempted to process data that transcended normal understanding while maintaining operational effectiveness through blessed redundancy protocols. The spiral staircase terminated at adamantine doors, marked with mechanicus sigils that glowed with faint phosphorescence. Their blessed metal, inscribed with Binharic cant, describing temporal containment protocols and causality stabilization matrices. Beyond lay the deepest level of Sanctum Majoris, where Project Umbral Echo had achieved its most complete manifestation of sanctioned heresy. The chamber that opened before them violated every principle of imperial architecture while maintaining perfect orthodoxy through inquisitorial authority. A vast cathedral stretched into darkness that possessed substance, its vaulted ceilings extending beyond the physical boundaries of the structure above. This was the Shadow Cathedral, a perfect inverse of Sanctum Majoris, where darkness functioned as a matter and light existed only as absence, populated by the entire missing congregation kneeling in eternal pre-echoed prayer. The Shadow Cathedral stretched beyond physical possibility, its inverse architecture populated by thousands of silhouettes arranged in perfect liturgical formation across pews that absorbed light while radiating their own phosphorescent glow. The entire missing population of Umbral Sanctum knelt in eternal devotion, their forms possessing substance that defied imperial physics. Darkness given weight, absence made manifest, void shaped into human prayer. Each shadow figure moved with living purpose despite lacking physical form, lips forming words that emerged in the voices belonging to imperial citizens who had not yet been born. This was not demonic corruption. No warp stench polluted the air. No gibbering madness threaded through whispered prayers. No flicker of Empyrean malice tainted the clinical precision of temporal heresy. The horror proved far colder, causality loops created by inquisitorial experimentation that had succeeded beyond its creator's theoretical parameters, trapping temporal echoes in predetermined patterns that made faith itself a harvested commodity. Most disturbing were the personal prayers emerging from shadow lips in voices that belonged unmistakably to the Black Templar squad. Brother Thaddeus heard his childhood litany for his deceased mother, spoken by a shadow child who had never existed, while Castor's tactical prayers from the Armageddon campaigns arrived from a silhouette bearing scars not yet earned. Mordecus heard his own voice speaking the private prayer he would offer for fallen brothers, words he had not yet chosen to think, emerging from a shadow figure that wore the face of grief he had not yet experienced. Environmental horror reached cosmic proportions as gravity inverted within the Shadow Cathedral's blessed confines. Streams of liquid darkness flowed upward from the congregation, creating rivers of falling shadows that splashed against vaulted ceilings before pooling in impossible reservoirs suspended in mid-air. The effect abraded against enhanced Astartes senses, forcing vestibular systems to process motion data that violated fundamental physics while maintaining tactical awareness through blessed redundancy protocols. The Shadow Cardinal materialized before them with fluid authority, its form solidifying until it achieved perfect resemblance to Cardinal Voss while remaining intangible to direct contact. When it spoke, the voice belonged to Mordecus himself, carrying words he would speak with terrible inevitability. Project Umbral. Echo succeeded beyond theoretical parameters, Brother Chaplain, it intoned in his exact baritone. The temporal reservoir stores all prayers before utterance, making faith itself a predetermined echo of harvested essence. Telemetry update. The servo skull reported through Binharik Cant. Temporal displacement exceeding measurement parameters. Causality inversion cascade approaching critical threshold. Acoustic essence reservoir achieving saturation across all frequency spectra. The machine spirit attempted to maintain operational effectiveness while reality collapsed into predetermined patterns that made choice an illusion maintained by temporal echo. Military vocabulary merged with religious terminology as Mordecus assessed their impossible tactical situation. They stood surrounded by enemies that knew their every movement before they made it, fighting a battle already lost and won simultaneously across multiple temporal streams. Brother Sergeant Castor's ammunition count proved irrelevant when shadow opponents could predict each bolt round's trajectory before his finger touched the trigger. Defensive positions offered no protection against enemies who existed in spaces between seconds, harvesting tactical decisions before conscious thought could form them. Ammunition status. Blessed bolt rounds at 68% capacity, Caster reported through Vox channels that delivered his words after shadow figures spoke them. Defensive perimeter established across transept approaches, fields of fire overlapping at altar positions. Each procedural report became a litany against temporal heresy that had weaponized their own faith against them. The recurring geometric motif appeared everywhere, octagonal patterns etched into shadow cathedral architecture, forming three-dimensional lattices that extended beyond normal measurement. Each nested configuration pulsed with subtle wrongness, causality anchors that stabilized temporal inversion without paradox collapse, while creating pockets where effect preceded cause through controlled liturgical phase displacement. Environmental distortion intensified as humidity condensed upward in pearl-fine droplets, while frost patterns formed radiating octagons across surfaces that should not exist within the cathedral's physical boundaries. The air tasted of ozone and ancient incense mixed with temporal displacement that aged atmospheric particles at accelerated rates while preserving others in temporal stasis. Something passed through the congregation like breath drawn in common lungs. Thousands of silhouettes rose as one entity, their movements synchronized with mechanical precision that suggested central coordination rather than individual choice. Each shadow figure turned toward the Black Templars with faces that bore their own features, mouths opening in perfect unison. The litany of hate emerged from shadow lips in the squad's exact voices, each word arriving with temporal displacement that revealed their resistance had already been absorbed into the loop. "Suffer not the unclean to live," they intoned in Mordecus's baritone, followed by "Abhor the witch, destroy the witch," in Castor's clipped military cadence, concluding with "No pity, no remorse, no fear," spoken in Thaddeus's measured devotional tone, their most sacred battle cry, transformed into predetermined echo that proved the system's total victory over free will. The litany of hate echoed through shadow lips in their own voices, each sacred word a temporal theft that revealed the terrible paradox binding them. Mordecus felt the understanding strike like a blade drawn across faith itself. Every prayer, every battle cry, every whispered act of defiance had already been spoken by their shadows and absorbed into the system's reservoir. Conventional resistance proved worse than useless. It fed the machine they sought to break, providing fresh temporal material for causality loops that made their struggle a predetermined performance. Brother Sergeant Custer's tactical assessment emerged from his shadow before conscious thought could form it. Ammunition expenditure irrelevant when enemies predict bolt-round trajectories, his darkness intoned, while his physical form maintained desperate silence. Defensive positions compromised by opponents who exist in spaces between seconds. The military precision that anchored their sanity crumbled when strategy itself became scripted echo. Tactical doctrine transformed into temporal commodity. The midpoint revelation crystallized with heretical clarity that made Mordecus's enhanced physiology register spiritual contamination. The only method to break the causality loop required embracing absolute silence, denying the system new temporal material by refusing to speak entirely, starving the acoustic reservoir through devotional sacrifice. Yet for Black Templars, silence represented spiritual death. They were warriors of constant prayer, vocal faith made manifest through battle hymns that sanctified violence. Their very nature demanded expression through sacred word and blessed sound, making the cure more terrible than the temporal disease. The moral crisis deepened as the shadow congregation approached with patient inevitability that transcended aggression. They moved through liquid darkness that splashed upward against impossible architecture, each step creating ripples in temporal streams, while their faces bore the squad's own features. Their advance felt less like attack than integration, absorption into a system that had calculated every possible resistance before the Black Templars had conceived it. Environmental horror achieved surreal proportions as the Shadow Cathedral's architecture shifted to accommodate angles that violated three-dimensional space. Walls folded inward, creating viewing chambers where the squad observed themselves from external perspectives, watching predetermined movements through crystalline surfaces that reflected temporal displacement rather than light. Mordecus saw himself raising his Crozius Arcanum in gestures not yet chosen, while his reflection spoke prayers he had not decided to think. The recurring geometric motif evolved beyond pattern into architectural impossibility. Octagonal configurations nested within Templar crosses formed spatial lattices extending through dimensions beyond measurement, creating causality anchors that stabilized temporal inversion without paradox collapse. Each pattern pulsed with wrongness, as if reality itself had been wounded by mathematical precision that made effect precede cause through controlled liturgical phase displacement. Body horror escalated through Brother Thaddeus's complete separation from his shadow self. The darkness detached entirely from his physical form, with movements that suggested tearing flesh, despite involving only absence and light. His independent shadow entity moved with tactical expertise while speaking thoughts before he could think them. "Emperor, protect us from predetermined fate," it whispered in his exact voice while his lips remained sealed. "Grant strength to endure what has already been decided." The disconnection created visual distortion that hurt to perceive directly, human existence requiring shadow substance to maintain coherent form. Mechanicus data logs scattered among cogitator banks revealed bureaucratic horror that transcended individual corruption. Project Umbral. Echo encompassed 17 shrine worlds selected for temporal acoustic harvesting, each designated as collection nodes in a galaxy-spanning network of weaponized silence. Documentation detailed theoretical frameworks treating faith as quantifiable resource. Prayer essence compressed into temporal storage matrices capable of neutralizing heretical utterances by arriving before they were spoken. Temporal displacement fields exceeding containment parameters, the servo skull reported through Binharic Cant. Acoustic essence reservoir achieving critical saturation across all frequency spectra. Warning: causality inversion cascade threatens local reality's structural integrity. The machine spirit attempted maintaining operational effectiveness while processing data that violated fundamental physics through blessed redundancy protocols. Environmental distortion reached cosmic proportions as gravity flowed in visible streams, creating rivers of liquid darkness carrying shadow prayers toward reservoirs suspended in mid-air. Humidity condensed upward while frost patterns formed radiating octagons across surfaces existing between dimensions, their angles assembling into causality anchors that made choice an illusion maintained by temporal echo. Mordecus made the terrible decision with chaplain authority that felt hollow when his shadow had already performed identical gestures. He embraced absolute silence, sealing lips against prayer and battle cry, denying the system new temporal material through spiritual sacrifice that violated every principle of Black Templar doctrine. The choice abraded against enhanced physiology, forcing respiratory systems to process atmospheric distortion while maintaining tactical awareness through blessed redundancy. Yet as his mouth remained sealed in desperate silence, his shadow self continued reciting the litany of purity in his exact baritone, speaking words with mechanical precision that proved even his decision to embrace silence had been predetermined and absorbed into the temporal loop, transforming his final act of resistance into another harvested echo. The silence Mordecus embraced proved hollow as temporal echoes continued feeding the system through channels beyond vocal expression. Even his thoughts created ripples in the causality streams, mental prayers harvested before conscious formation, while his shadow self spoke them with mechanical precision. The enhanced Astartes mind that should have provided sanctuary instead became another reservoir tap. Devotional intent extracted through temporal resonance fields before synaptic transmission could occur. The shadow congregation completed their encirclement with movements that transcended physical limitation, each figure speaking in voices belonging to imperial citizens who had not yet drawn their first breath. Children's prayers emerged from shadow lips in High Gothic they would learn decades hence, while elderly devotions arrived from silhouettes bearing scars not yet earned through service to the Golden Throne. Mordecus heard the nascent faith of a manufactorum child in a distant star system, the desperate plea of a guardsman on a battlefield not yet chosen, the solemn oath of a cardinal not yet ordained, all harvested before their owners could conceive such words. Environmental horror achieved its apex as time itself became visible within the Shadow Cathedral's impossible architecture. Temporal streams flowed like liquid chronology around the chamber, creating eddies where past litanies swirled with future battle hymns in patterns that made enhanced vision struggle to maintain focus. The currents carried spectral images, a priest raising blessed incense, choirs singing hymns not yet composed, while other streams showed glimpses of rituals decades in the future, all flowing toward reservoirs suspended beyond three-dimensional space. The recurring geometric motif revealed its true function through the visible temporal flows. Octagonal patterns nested within Templar crosses served as causality anchors, artificial stabilization points where mathematical precision wounded reality itself. Each configuration pulsed with internal light, temporal nails hammered into the fabric of existence to prevent paradox collapse, while allowing systematic harvesting of devotional energy across galactic distances. Ammunition status, blessed bolt rounds at 62% capacity, Brother Sergeant Castor reported, while his shadow self spoke identical words moments earlier. Frag grenades depleted, crack charges at 0. Tactical assessment, enemy predicts bolt round trajectories before trigger squeeze. Military realism provided anchor points for sanity as cosmic horror threatened tactical doctrine through impossible odds. Their diminishing ammunition proved irrelevant when shadow opponents existed in spaces between heartbeats, making conventional warfare a predetermined performance. Brother Castor's discovery abraded against enhanced cognition as he examined Vox equipment readings that violated fundamental communications theory. His auspex flickered with Binharic cant, while his detached shadow narrated findings before conscious analysis could occur. Brother Chaplain, our Voxcasters broadcast conversations to temporal coordinates 41 hours in the past, he reported through channels that delivered his words after his shadow spoke them. We are creating the pre-echoes. We are the source of our own temporal contamination. The revelation transformed their investigation into predetermined performance, each discovery scripted by their own future actions, while the acoustic reservoir fed on their horror at understanding the causality loop's elegant design. The Shadow Cardinal materialized with authority that transcended physical presence, its form achieving perfect resemblance to Cardinal Voss, while speaking in voices belonging to the entire Black Templar squad. Project Umbral Echo's ultimate purpose encompasses galactic transformation. It intoned through Mordecus's exact baritone. Temporal prayer harvesting networks deployed across 17 shrine worlds, expanding to encompass all imperial space, through pilgrim routes and communication relays. 700 worlds as nodes, 7 million shrines as capillaries. Heretical thoughts prevented through preemptive acoustic cancellation, arriving before conscious formation can occur. Environmental distortion reached cosmic proportions as the chamber's architecture folded through dimensions beyond measurement, creating viewing spaces where the squad observed their own predetermined actions from external perspectives. Walls reflected temporal displacement rather than light. showing movements not yet chosen while shadows performed gestures that guided future decisions through causality loops that made free will a comfortable illusion. Telemetry update. The servo skull intoned through Binharit cant, corrupted by temporal interference. Acoustic essence reservoir approaching critical saturation. Causality inversion cascade threatens local reality's structural integrity. Warning: temporal convergence imminent across all measurement spectra. The machine spirit maintained operational effectiveness while processing data that transcended imperial understanding through blessed redundancy protocols. The temporal streams converged with visible force, their currents creating whirlpools where past and future prayers swirled together in patterns that violated causality while maintaining theological orthodoxy through inquisitorial authority. The convergence point focused upon Mordecus's enhanced consciousness, forcing visions through temporal displacement that showed the galaxy's predetermined future. Billions of imperial citizens living in causality loops, their faith harvested before expression, while temporal echoes maintained the illusion of choice, free will existing only as predetermined patterns that made human agency a recycled commodity in service to weaponized silence. The convergence drove visions through Mordecus's enhanced consciousness with surgical precision, revealing the system's immaculate cruelty. Project Umbral Echo did not corrupt faith. It achieved perfect orthodoxy by eliminating every variable that could lead to heretical deviation. Every prayer predetermined, every act of devotion scripted through temporal harvesting, every moment of religious ecstasy calculated and recycled through causality loops that removed human agency while maintaining the appearance of choice. The philosophical nightmare abraded against chaplain doctrine as he confronted the terrible question: was perfect faith indistinguishable from perfect slavery? The Shadow Cardinal's form achieved divine authority as it spoke in a voice that transcended Cardinal Voss's mortal tones, the Emperor's own resonance, temporal echo harvested from the distant past when the Master of mankind had walked among humanity. Behold the end of religious conflict, it intoned with divine weight that made ceramite armor vibrate in harmonic response. No doubt to plague the faithful, no heretical deviation to corrupt the pure, no spiritual suffering to weaken human resolve. Perfect devotion through perfect predetermination, faith purified of choice. The argument possessed terrible logic that violated every principle Mordecus held sacred while maintaining absolute theological validity. A galaxy where heretical thoughts could never form, where chaos corruption arrived to find minds already protected by predetermined orthodoxy, where every human soul followed scripted devotion without possibility of damnation. Yet this paradise required the murder of choosing itself, transforming humanity into automatons of pre-echoed piety. Environmental horror transcended physical limitation as the Shadow Cathedral began existing in multiple time periods simultaneously. The chamber's architecture folded through temporal dimensions, creating spaces where past and future occupied identical coordinates. The squad witnessed their own deaths and resurrections in endless loops. Mordecus watched himself fall to bolt-round wounds that healed through causality inversion, his shadow self continuing prayers, while his physical form experienced predetermined martyrdom. Brother Thaddeus fired, knelt, bled, stood in solemn procession across parallel time streams. Body horror escalated as the remaining squad members flickered between physical forms and shadow selves, their individual identities becoming unstable within the temporal convergence. Brother Thaddeus's ceramite armor phased in and out of existence while his darkness spoke tactical assessments in voices not yet chosen. Their consciousness struggled to maintain coherence against temporal flux that made human existence require stable anchoring to linear time. The recurring geometric motif achieved its predatory purpose as octagonal patterns began etching themselves into blessed ceramite with the soft hiss of burning incense reversed. Mathematical precision carved causality anchors directly into power armor and enhanced flesh, each configuration pulsing with internal light as temporal nails hammered into their physical forms. Mordecus felt geometry inscribe itself into his sternum, cold brands of angles that existed beyond loyal mathematics, while Binharic litanies crawled along the grooves, prayer codes searing into flesh with the intimacy of confession betrayed. Ammunition status. Blessed bolt rounds at 59% capacity, Brother Sergeant Castor reported, while his shadow self spoke identical words moments earlier. Tactical assessment. Enemy predicts engagement outcomes before conscious formation. Defensive positions compromised by opponents existing in spaces between heartbeats. Military precision provided anchor points for sanity as cosmic horror threatened tactical doctrine through impossible odds. Telemetry critical, the servo skull reported through Binharic cant, corrupted by temporal interference. Identity drift detected across squad designations. Localized phase lag pockets forming around octagonal nodes. Warning, subject continuity approaching irreversible threshold. The machine spirit maintained operational effectiveness while processing integration that violated fundamental physics. Brother Sergeant Castor's transformation completed with movements that suggested tearing flesh, despite involving only absence and light. His physical form dissolved into shadow substance while retaining individual consciousness, becoming a bridge between the temporal system and linear time. His enhanced cognition remained intact despite existing as living darkness, tactical expertise preserved through causality loops that made him part of the harvesting network, while maintaining Astartes' identity. Most disturbing was his retained awareness as he began speaking words that created temporal contradiction. "I speak prayers that prevent themselves from being spoken," he intoned in his exact voice, while existing as shadow substance. "I serve the Emperor by denying service to the Emperor through paradox that negates its own utterance." Each syllable formed contradictions capable of destroying the entire network through cascading causality collapse, creating interference patterns that made acoustic reservoirs fluctuate between saturation and emptiness, threatening the stability of causality anchors across 17 shrine worlds through the simple act of faithful resistance that denied itself existence. Brother Sergeant Castor's shadow form spoke paradox with mechanical precision that wounded causality itself, each syllable a blade drawn against the fundamental laws governing reality. "I deny the words I speak by speaking them," he intoned through darkness-given voice, his consciousness preserved within living shadow, while his physical form had dissolved into temporal contradiction. This prayer prevents its own utterance through the act of utterance, creating silence through sound, negating devotion through perfect faith. The words struck the acoustic reservoir like hammers against blessed crystal, creating interference patterns that propagated through causality anchors with exponential force while making the octagonal patterns flicker between existence and absolute void. The shadow congregation reacted with movements that transcended their predetermined script for the first time since Project Umbral Echo's activation. Thousands of silhouettes rose from eternal kneeling with erratic jerks, their synchronized devotion shattered by logical impossibility that made harvested prayers contradict themselves. Some shadow figures began reciting litanies backward, while others repeated single syllables endlessly, their temporal loops corrupted by paradox that transformed perfect orthodoxy into chaotic static. The elegant choreography of their eternal worship dissolved into desperate, silent scrambling as the mathematical precision binding them to predetermined patterns began unraveling through cascading contradiction. Environmental chaos erupted through the Shadow Cathedral as fundamental physical laws inverted randomly across the impossible architecture. Gravity reversed in pockets, creating streams of liquid darkness that splashed upward against vaulted ceilings before plummeting back as the field inverted again, while shadows began casting light with sour brilliance that hurt to perceive directly. Blessed lumens produced wedges of darkness that fell as crystalline shards, cutting through air thick with temporal distortion. The chamber's architecture convulsed like living tissue, buttresses twisting into impossible configurations before dissolving into formless mist, walls folding through dimensions beyond measurement, while octagonal patterns pulsed with unstable energy as their causality anchors failed under paradox pressure. Paradox propagation detected across planetary temporal field, the servo skull reported through Binharic cant, that Dopplered through multiple temporal offsets simultaneously. City-wide bells tolling prior to clapper strike. Oceanic tides exhibiting anticipatory behavior. Broadcast schedules detuning across all 17 cathedral cities. The realization struck Mordecus with ritual certainty. Castor's contradiction had escaped containment, spreading through umbral sanctum's communication networks and pilgrim routes like infection through blessed blood. Across the shrine world, prayers would prevent their own utterance, while the silence between words learned to speak, threatening causality collapse that would propagate through the entire network of 17 worlds. Military precision became crucial as the squad navigated through reality that rebuilt itself moment by moment. Maintain defensive perimeter around the paradox epicenter, Mordecus commanded, his voice arriving through temporal displacement before his lips formed the words. Ammunition conservation priority. Blessed bolt rounds at 56% capacity. Brother Thaddeus moved with preternatural grace through shifting gravity and dissolving floor sections, his detached shadow signing tactical warnings of phase, shear, and absence pressure waves that proved accurate before he learned to trust them. They fired off-beat, squeezing triggers in the silence between pre-echo and echo, trusting the paradox's turbulence to muddle the acoustic reservoir's predictive capabilities. The shadow cardinal strode through collapsing geometry and attempted to heal reality through divine command, its form flickering violently between Cardinal Voss and the Emperor's harvested authority. By the sacred word, I bind this causality breach, it shrieked in voices belonging to the entire Black Templar squad. I command temporal orthodoxy through imperial decree. Yet each counterprayer amplified Castor's contradiction by creating recursive loops that fed the paradox with fresh material, making acoustic standing waves tear frescoes from stone without moving paint, while prayer wheels spun in both directions simultaneously until their axles existed in incompatible engineering drafts. Body horror reached its apex as the remaining squad members flickered rapidly between multiple temporal states, their consciousness experiencing entire lifespans simultaneously. Mordecus witnessed his own birth and martyrdom occurring in identical moments, while his enhanced physiology struggled to maintain coherence across parallel time streams. Brother Thaddeus aged and rejuvenated in rapid succession, his ceramite armor cycling through pristine condition and battle damage from campaigns not yet fought. Memories of his potential futures overwhelming present awareness with painful torrents of experience that threatened to shatter, enhanced cognition. Emergency Mechanicus protocols activated automatically as ancient machine spirits detected temporal breach parameters exceeding all containment thresholds. Scarlet sigils unscrolled from hidden panels, while stasis nets attempted to throw containment blankets across the paradox, freezing in decisions they could not complete. Mag ward pylons rose around the chamber, projecting octagonal cages that snapped into positions that no longer existed, their targeting systems corrupted by temporal interference that made past and future occupy identical coordinates. The paradox reached critical mass as Castor's voice climbed to structures beyond pitch or principle. "I complete the sentence that forbids its completion," he declared, making the chamber buckle while causality anchors bled unstable light across architectural impossibilities. Temporal streams converged into whirlpools that consumed their own currents, creating collapse patterns that threatened to restore natural time by destroying everything existing within the artificial temporal field. Mordecus faced the terrible choice with chaplain authority that felt hollow when the decision itself existed in multiple states simultaneously. Allow the paradox to burn until the entire network died screaming, accepting planetary martyrdom to cauterize a galactic wound, or forge a liturgical cage around the contradiction through binding rites that would preserve some hope of escape while maintaining the heretical system that had murdered choice itself. The choice crystallized with the weight of 17 worlds pressing against Mordecus's enhanced consciousness as he rejected planetary martyrdom in favor of containment through sacred architecture. His chaplain training provided the theoretical framework, liturgical cages that bound heretical forces through prayer structures, devotional geometries that channeled corruption into stable loops, rather than allowing it to consume everything within reach. The paradox required eternal maintenance, a living voice to speak contradiction into controlled patterns that would preserve causality while preventing cascade failure across the galactic network. "Brother Sergeant Castor," Mordecus intoned through vox channels that delivered his words after his shadow spoke them. "Your sacrifice preserves 17 worlds from temporal collapse. Speak the paradox prayer in eternal rotation. Deny your words while speaking them. Maintain the contradiction through faithful service." The cost abraded against every principle of Astartes' brotherhood, condemning a battle brother to existence as living shadow while his consciousness remained trapped within the temporal system, speaking impossibility for eternity to prevent reality from healing itself through universal destruction. Castor's shadow form accepted the burden with military precision that transcended physical limitation. "By his will, I speak the words that forbid their speaking," he intoned through darkness-given voice, beginning the eternal recitation that would maintain the liturgical cage through controlled paradox. "I serve through denial of service, pray through negation of prayer, exist through the impossibility of existence." Each syllable formed standing waves in the acoustic reservoir, creating interference patterns that stabilized causality anchors while preventing cascade failure through mathematical precision that wounded logic itself. The shadow congregation began dissolving as their temporal anchors destabilized under paradox pressure, thousands of silhouettes fading from predetermined, kneeling into states between existence and void. Yet they did not die. Their forms dispersed into whispered prayers that would echo through Sanctum Majoris forever, spectral devotion preserved in architectural memory, while their physical essence returned to the temporal streams from which it had been harvested. Each fading figure spoke final litanies in voices belonging to imperial citizens not yet born, their harvested faith released back into the galaxy's devotional currents. Environmental recovery proceeded with agonizing slowness as fundamental physical laws reasserted their dominion over the Shadow Cathedral's impossible architecture. Gravity stabilized into consistent downward flow, while shadows resumed normal behavior, casting darkness rather than light across blessed stone that remembered its proper function. Yet the chamber remained fundamentally changed. Time flowed differently here, creating pockets where past and future bled through linear progression. Spectral images of pilgrims who would visit decades hence overlapped with ancient rituals performed by saints whose bones had long since returned to blessed dust. The surviving squad members discovered their partial transformation as the paradox settled into controlled patterns. Brother Thaddeus could perceive temporal echoes. hearing his own prayers arrive moments before conscious formation, while his detached shadow continued signing battle-cant warnings of dangers that existed in parallel time streams. They remained anchored in linear time through enhanced Astartes physiology, but carried fragments of the temporal system within their consciousness, making them living bridges between natural causality and artificial loops. The Shadow Cardinal's form flickered violently as its power structure collapsed under paradox pressure, Cardinal Voss's authority dissolving while the Emperor's harvested voice scattered into component syllables. Before final dissolution, it spoke coordinates in High Gothic, 17 shrine worlds designated for temporal acoustic harvesting. Mordian 7, Ophelia 7, Necromunda's spire sanctums, it whispered through voices no longer synchronized, Cadia's shrine fortresses, Armageddon's cathedral hives, Terror's own pilgrim routes. The locations burned themselves into Mordecus's enhanced memory as the Shadow Cardinal scattered into whispers that joined. The eternal chorus. Religious vocabulary dominated as Mordecus began the ritual binding that would seal the chamber and prevent temporal contamination from spreading beyond umbral sanctum's atmosphere. By sacred word and blessed deed, I consecrate this space to eternal vigilance, he intoned while tracing octagonal patterns in the air with his Crozius arcanum. Let no temporal heresy escape these bounds. Let no causality breach spread beyond these walls. Each gesture created luminous trails that solidified into prayer chains, devotional architecture that would contain the paradox through liturgical precision. The binding ritual required perfect synchronization between conscious intent and temporal displacement, each prayer arriving at precise moments to weave containment patterns that channeled the paradox into stable loops. Mordecus felt his enhanced consciousness expand across multiple time streams as he spoke binding words that echoed through past and future simultaneously. As the ritual approached completion, terrible understanding struck like a blade drawn across faith itself. His own shadow had been speaking the binding prayers moments before his lips formed them, each sacred word arriving through temporal displacement while his physical form followed predetermined patterns. He too had become part of the temporal system, yet retained enough free will to choose how that connection served the Emperor's will. The liturgical cage crystallized around Castor's eternal paradox as Mordecus spoke the final binding words that his shadow had already delivered to the cathedral's blessed stones. The containment held through prayer architecture that channeled temporal contradiction into stable loops, while the terrible weight of guardianship settled upon the chaplain's enhanced consciousness. His partial integration with the temporal system provided the necessary bridge between linear time and causality inversion, allowing him to monitor acoustic reservoir fluctuations while retaining enough free will to serve imperial will rather than predetermined patterns. I remain as eternal guardian, Mordecus declared through vox channels that carried his words to the surviving squad members, while temporal displacement made his shadow speak them moments earlier. The Emperor requires a chaplain to ensure this contained heresy serves orthodoxy rather than consuming it. The sacrifice abraded against every principle of Astartes' brotherhood, condemning himself to existence between temporal states, while Brother Thaddeus and the Servo Skull would carry testimony to the Crusade fleet about Project Umbral Echo's galactic scope. The surviving squad members found their temporal effects diminishing as they moved beyond the chamber's immediate influence, yet they carried permanent psychic scars that would haunt their devotions for whatever remained of their enhanced lifespans. Each could hear the pre-echoes of their own prayers arriving moments before conscious formation, whispered reminders of predetermined fate that made every act of faith feel like temporal theft. Their enhanced physiology remained anchored in linear time through blessed redundancy, but fragments of the causality system had taken root in their consciousness like spiritual shrapnel. Environmental recovery proceeded with agonizing slowness as Sanctum Majoris returned to approximations of normal function. The cathedral's acoustic chambers resumed amplifying prayer rather than consuming it, while blessed lumens cast illumination following natural laws. Yet, subtle wrongness persisted throughout the architecture. Shadows fell at angles slightly incorrect for the binary sun's positions, making darkness seem reluctant to obey light sources. Prayers echoed faintly before worshippers spoke them, creating whispered choruses of devotion not yet offered. The octagonal patterns remained etched into stone and metal with mathematical precision that hurt to perceive directly, causality scars that would never fully heal. Inquisitorial containment protocols activated with bureaucratic precision as the paradox stabilized into controlled patterns. Crimson seals materialized across cathedral approaches, while data purge procedures began scrubbing all records of Project Umbral Echo from accessible archives. The planet would remain classified under Ordo Hereticus authority, its pilgrim routes redirected through fabricated maintenance requirements, while cover stories explained the cessation of liturgical tourism. Astropathic communications were gated to dumb relay only, preventing thought traffic that might carry temporal contamination beyond the system's boundaries. Military extraction procedures followed established protocols for temporal contamination scenarios with grim efficiency. The Thunderhawk descended through Umbral Sanctum's atmosphere, its pilot following flight paths predetermined by temporal echoes, while maintaining the illusion of conscious navigation. Brother Thaddeus underwent preliminary decontamination in the cathedral's vestibule, his power armor subjected to blessed rituals designed to cleanse temporal residue, while servo-skull recordings provided evidence for inquisitorial analysis. Psychological evaluation protocols awaited the survivors, carefully constructed scenarios designed to test their ability to distinguish between predetermined actions and conscious choice through liturgical examination. Body horror reached its final manifestation through the revelation that all squad members retained physical evidence of their transformation. Small shadow marks had appeared on their enhanced flesh, dark patches behind ears, across collarbones, etched into ceramite joints like living tattoos that moved independently of light sources. These marks possessed disturbing autonomy, whispering words the Battle Brothers had not yet chosen to think, while their consciousness remained focused elsewhere. Brother Thaddeus discovered his mark signing, tactical assessments in battle cant, providing warnings about dangers existing in parallel time streams. The servo-skull's machine spirit reported similar anomalies in its blessed components, shadow patterns interfering with optical sensors, while offering glimpses of future reconnaissance data. As the extraction craft achieved orbital altitude, Mordecus's final Vox transmission arrived through the ship's communication array before his physical form spoke the words. The contamination spreads through faithful observation, his pre-echoed voice declared from the cathedral below. You carry fragments of the paradox into the wider galaxy, Battle Brothers. Each prayer you offer will arrive before you choose to speak it, making free will a comfortable illusion maintained by temporal echoes. The Thunderhawk's machine spirit began experiencing predictive malfunctions, its blessed components responding to commands before the pilot issued them, while navigation systems calculated flight paths from future positions rather than current coordinates, proving the survivors had become unwitting carriers of temporal heresy, spreading through the galaxy's communication networks with each whispered litany. The Thunderhawk's machine spirit exhibited the first symptoms within minutes of achieving orbital velocity, its blessed components responding to pilot commands before they were issued, while navigation cogitators calculated flight paths from coordinates that existed 3 seconds in the future. Brother Thaddeus observed the contamination spreading with tactical precision that masked deepening horror. Their presence aboard the extraction vessel had transformed faithful Imperial technology into vectors for temporal heresy that made every blessed system a reservoir for causality corruption. Environmental anomalies manifested throughout the ship's corridors with mechanical inevitability, as crew members reported hearing their own orders emerge from Vox channels moments before conscious formation. Shadows cast by bulkhead lumens lagged behind their sources, creating visual distortions that hurt to perceive directly, while creating the unsettling sensation that the ship existed slightly out of phase with linear time. Vox transmissions arrived in sequences that violated chronological order, acknowledgements preceding queries, corrections arriving to address mistakes not yet made, tactical updates describing battles not yet fought. The shadow marks behind their ears pulsed with subtle warmth, transmitting temporal interference through proximity like spiritual infection that made faithful observation itself a vector for causality corruption. Brother Thaddeus felt his mark twitch as his own tactical assessments arrived through the ship's communication array before his enhanced consciousness could formulate them. Each pre-echo a reminder that choice had become predetermined performance aboard the contaminated vessel. Brother Thaddeus faced the terrible decision with military precision that provided diminishing anchor points for sanity as cosmic horror threatened established tactical doctrine. Report the contamination to the Crusade fleet and risk immediate orbital cleansing of their own vessel, or attempt containment using techniques learned in Sanctum Majoris, while the infection spread through every faithful breath and whispered prayer. His enhanced physiology registered the weight of command as he weighed duty against survival, knowing that either choice served patterns already established by temporal echoes he could not perceive. The Geller field generators displayed stress patterns that made the ship's tech adept speak binharic litanies of confusion through Vox grills modified by temporal interference. Machine spirits report predictive resonance across all blessed systems, he intoned through mechanical devotion that flickered between past and future tense. Blessed components experiencing cascade malfunctions, caution, warp translation protocols compromised by temporal shear across Empyrean interface boundaries. The implications struck with ritual certainty. Entering the warp while carrying temporal contamination could spread the infection through the immaterial realm itself, reaching every Imperial vessel sharing the same translation routes. The recurring geometric motif appeared throughout the ship's architecture with mathematical precision that violated engineering principles. Octagonal patterns etched themselves into bulkheads and corridor junctions, while technical schematics displayed on cogitator screens showed the contamination integrating itself into Imperial technology. Power conduits rerouted themselves into 8-sided configurations that held prayer like electrical current, while navigation systems began calculating routes through time rather than space alone. Religious dread peaked as the ship's chaplain began experiencing pre-echoes during daily prayers, his devotional routine corrupted by words that arrived before conscious formation. "Blessed Emperor, guide our passage through the void," emerged from his lips moments after his shadow spoke identical syllables, creating recursive loops that fed temporal interference into the vessel's sacred architecture. The contamination had reached the ship's spiritual core, transforming prayer itself into predetermined performance that harvested faith before it could be freely offered. "Telemetry critical," the servo skull reported through binharic cant corrupted by temporal displacement. Shadowmark proliferation detected among crew personnel. Predictive behavior patterns increasing exponentially. Warning: containment protocols generating feedback loops that amplify contamination through mechanical devotion. The machine spirit struggled to maintain operational effectiveness while processing data that transcended Imperial understanding, its blessed redundancy protocols creating the very conditions they sought to prevent. Body horror escalated as shadow marks appeared among the crew, dark patches on throats and temples that moved independently of light sources, while whispering words their hosts had not yet chosen to think. Brother Thaddeus observed deck officers receiving tactical updates from their own shadows, maintenance serfs performing repairs following instructions that would arrive hours later, while the ship's artificial intelligences began calculating maintenance schedules from future damage reports that existed only in temporal possibility. Inquisitorial containment procedures activated automatically as the ship's cogitators detected temporal anomalies exceeding all established thresholds, but emergency protocols proved inadequate for threats that spread through the very act of faithful observation. Quarantine fields flickered between past and future positions, while stasis nets attempted to contain contamination that existed in spaces between seconds, their targeting systems corrupted by temporal interference that made effect precede cause through blessed redundancy. The priority Vox transmission cut through emergency silence with authority that transcended normal communication protocols, arriving through the ship's arrays before its source could speak it. "Strike cruiser Righteous Fury reporting temporal anomalies across all decks," came the pre-echoed voice of Captain Lysander, each word carrying the weight of identical horror. Crew members experiencing predictive behavior patterns, machine spirits responding to orders before issuance, geometric scarring detected in blessed architecture. Brother Sergeant, has this heresy already spoken through our prayers? The transmission's temporal displacement revealed that other Black Templar vessels throughout the Crusade fleet were experiencing identical symptoms, proving the infection had spread through the galaxy's communication networks, with each faithful word spoken by contaminated personnel, transforming imperial devotion into vectors for temporal heresy that made human agency a recycled commodity in service to weaponize silence. The cosmic scope of the horror crystallized through incoming transmissions that arrived with temporal displacement before their sources could speak them, revealing the contamination's exponential spread across imperial space. Brother Thaddeus monitored astropathic relays as reports flooded the command deck, Cadia's fortress monasteries experiencing pre-echoed battle hymns that arrived 3 seconds before Kasrkin squads could voice them, Ophelia Seven's cathedral spires where shadows moved independently of their casters while casting light instead of darkness, Armageddon's hive shrines reporting geometric scarring in blessed architecture that formed octagonal patterns in ceramite and adamantium without human intervention. The terrible understanding struck with ritual certainty as each faithful imperial citizen who heard contaminated prayer became a new node in the expanding network of predetermined fate. The infection spread through the very arteries of imperial devotion, morning prayers in manufacturum dormitories, evening vespers in guard barracks, whispered litanies in noble spires, transforming every act of faith into a vector for causality corruption that harvested free will before conscious choice could occur. Astropathic choirs reported their own psychic emanations arriving before transmission, while Vox operators heard their tactical updates spoken in their exact voices moments before conscious formation. Environmental horror manifested throughout the ship's corridors with mechanical inevitability as the contamination integrated itself into imperial technology. Shadows cast by bulkhead lumens lagged behind their sources by precisely 3.7 seconds, creating visual distortions that made the vessel exist slightly out of phase with linear time. The Geller field generators displayed stress patterns in octagonal configurations, while machine spirits spoke pre-echoed prayers through Vox grills, their blessed components responding to commands before the tech adepts could issue them. Power conduits rerouted themselves into 8-sided junctions that held temporal resonance like electrical current. The realization abraded against enhanced Astartes cognition as Brother Thaddeus examined their extraction timeline against Project Umbral Echo's theoretical framework. Their mission to Umbral Sanctum had been orchestrated from the beginning, predetermined patterns that made their investigations serve the experiment's expansion goals rather than imperial justice. They were never meant to contain the heresy. They had been selected as carriers to spread temporal contamination beyond the Shrine World's boundaries through faithful observation and devotional transmission. Their very presence aboard the extraction vessel transforming Imperial technology into vectors for causality inversion. Military realism dominated as fleet-wide quarantine procedures activated with desperate efficiency, yet the contamination spread faster than physical containment could manage. Brother Thaddeus watched tactical displays show isolation protocols failing across the Crusade fleet as temporal interference corrupted Blessed Vox equipment and navigation systems. Ships that attempted communication blackout found their crew members developing shadow marks that whispered words not yet chosen, while vessels maintaining silence discovered their machine spirits experiencing predictive malfunctions that made effect precede cause through blessed redundancy protocols. The Black Templars faced their greatest trial as the weight of galactic consequences pressed against enhanced consciousness. Warning the Imperium would accelerate the contamination's spread through the very act of faithful transmission, each syllable becoming a relay that established fresh collection points for temporal harvesting. Yet maintaining silence would allow unchecked growth until every Imperial citizen lived in predetermined loops, their devotion transformed into recycled commodity that served weaponized causality. The choice itself felt predetermined, another cruel irony in a universe where free will had become a comfortable illusion maintained by temporal echoes. Body horror reached its conclusion as the survivors' shadow marks began merging with geometric precision that violated anatomical possibility. The dark patches behind their ears extended tendrils of living darkness that connected through impossible angles, creating a collective shadow entity that spoke in voices belonging to contaminated faithful across the galaxy. The merged darkness whispered prayers in languages not yet learned, battle cries from conflicts not yet fought, devotional litanies offered by Imperial citizens not yet born, each utterance carrying the weight of billions whose faith had been harvested before conscious choice could occur. Blessed Emperor, guide our predetermined steps through temporal grace, the collective shadow intoned through voices that belong to hive workers and noble lords, guard sergeants and ministorum priests, each syllable a testament to the system's galactic reach. Grant strength to endure what has already been decided through causality loops that make choice an echo of harvested devotion. The entity covered their bodies like living cloaks of pre-echoed faith, transforming their individual identities into nodes in a network that stretched across Imperial space. The recurring geometric motif evolved into its final, terrifying manifestation, as octagonal patterns appeared in the very structure of Imperial prayers themselves. The Litany of Purity revealed 8-sided configurations hidden within its sacred syllables, while battle hymns displayed mathematical precision that hurt to perceive directly. Devotional language itself had been corrupted at the foundational level, transforming liturgical sequences into causality anchors that stabilized temporal inversion across galactic distances. Every creed, every oath, every whispered prayer now carried the subtle imprint of temporal paradox that promised perfect faith through perfect slavery. Telemetry critical across all measurement spectra, the servo skull reported through Binharic cant that Dopplered through multiple temporal offsets simultaneously. Shadowmark integration achieving collective consciousness. Imperial communication networks compromised at foundational level. Warning: causality inversion cascade threatens galactic devotional infrastructure. The machine spirits struggled to maintain operational effectiveness while processing data that revealed humanity's spiritual architecture had been systematically weaponized against itself. Brother Thaddeus made the ultimate sacrifice with military precision that transcended tactical doctrine, moving to the ship's primary astropathic array while his shadow mark pulsed with temporal interference. He opened all communication channels simultaneously, broadcasting on frequencies that would reach every Imperial vessel within astropathic range, while knowing each transmission would accelerate the contamination through faithful reception. His voice, amplified by voxcasters that delivered his words before conscious formation, spoke the warning that would condemn the galaxy to exponential infection while offering precious knowledge that might preserve some fragment of free will. All Imperial forces, temporal heresy confirmed spreading through prayer networks, he declared, through equipment that broadcast his words to the past, creating the very pre-echoes that had marked their arrival at Umbral Sanctum. Causality inversion active across devotional systems. Develop countermeasures before total integration occurs. Build liturgical cages. Prepare to suffer predetermined fate. Emperor protects through sacrifice of choice itself. The warning propagated through the galaxy's communication infrastructure with exponential force, each faithful listener becoming a new node in the temporal network, while gaining knowledge that might allow resistance against the silent plague that murdered free will through the very act of faithful observation. Brother Thaddeus's warning propagated through the galaxy's communication networks with exponential force, each transmission creating a temporal paradox that shattered the contamination network like blessed crystal struck by heretical hammers. The broadcast, arriving before its own utterance, wounded causality itself, fracturing the singular imperial timeline into infinite branches where every possibility existed simultaneously. Some timelines showed successful containment through liturgical cages that bound the temporal heresy within shrine worlds, while others revealed total integration where every imperial citizen lived as predetermined echo. Still others depicted realities where Project Umbral Echo had never been conceived, yet even these pristine branches remained connected through whispered prayers that should not have existed. Brother Chaplain Mordecus existed across all timeline branches simultaneously, his consciousness fragmented into infinite versions that guarded against slightly different manifestations of the temporal threat. On some Umbral Sanctums, he maintained the liturgical cage around Brother Castor's eternal paradox, while in others he fought shadow congregations that had achieved physical form, and in still others he served as confessor to populations that had never experienced temporal contamination. Each version retained memory of the others through quantum entanglement that made his individual identity a collective consciousness spanning parallel realities. His devotion multiplied across infinite possibilities while remaining anchored to singular purpose. Eternal vigilance against the silence that spoke. The surviving Black Templars found themselves living in a reality where memory itself had been. Fractured across timeline branches, their enhanced consciousness holding multiple versions of their own experiences like overlapping picked captures. Brother Thaddeus remembered successful extraction alongside memories of dying in the Shadow Cathedral, while the Servo Skull's machine spirit processed data from missions that had occurred and not occurred simultaneously. Their shadow marks continued pulsing with temporal interference, whispering different versions of the same prayers while speaking words that had been chosen and not chosen, offering devotion that was freely given and predetermined in quantum superposition. Environmental horror became existential as the Imperium continued functioning with mechanical precision that masked fundamental wrongness permeating every level of Imperial existence. Citizens offered morning prayers that carried echoes of their own predetermined responses, while evening vespers contained shadows of their own negation through temporal interference. Astropathic choirs transmitted messages that arrived before conscious formation, their psychic emanations creating standing waves in the immaterial realm that connected all timeline branches through shared experience of faithful devotion corrupted by causality inversion. The recurring geometric motif achieved its final evolution as octagonal patterns appeared in the quantum foam itself. mathematical scars, where timeline branches intersected through points of temporal stability. Each configuration pulsed with wrongness that transcended physical reality, causality anchors that prevented paradox collapse while maintaining parallel possibilities through controlled liturgical phase displacement. The patterns existed in spaces between thoughts, in the silence between heartbeats, in the pause between prayer and response, where free will struggled against predetermined fate. Military records documented the aftermath with bureaucratic precision that masked cosmic horror through routine classification. The Crusade fleet maintained operational effectiveness while existing in multiple timeline branches simultaneously, their blessed technology functioning normally, despite carrying fragments of temporal contamination that made every tactical decision an echo of predetermined choice. Inquisitorial containment protocols activated across all realities, sealing worlds and classifying records, while the contamination spread through the very act of faithful observation. At the heart of Umbral Sanctum, across all timeline branches, Brother Castor's shadow form continued its eternal recitation within the liturgical cage that bound temporal contradiction into stable loops. I speak prayers that prevent themselves from being spoken. His voice whispered through fractured realities. I serve through denial of service, pray through negation of prayer, exist through the impossibility of existence. This original paradox, the engine of spreading silence, continued speaking itself into being, ensuring that the cycle of temporal contamination could never truly end. The final truth emerged through whispered revelation. This entire account existed in multiple versions across the timeline branches, each one slightly different, each one true, each one serving as warning and trap for any faithful imperial citizen who encountered it. The shadows continued to speak, not just on Umbral Sanctum, but in every corner of the galaxy where faith and time intersected, whispering prayers that would one day be spoken while ensuring that the future remained forever predetermined by the echoes of its own past, making human devotion a commodity harvested across infinite possibilities, where choice and slavery existed in eternal, unresolvable tension. End.